Okay, so let's pick up where we left off. Another week, another shiur. We are on Masechet Beitzah Daf Daled Amud Bet. We're now in the third case. You remember we had three cases of Rav. Well, the first two there was a machloket. In fact, in this case there is no machloket. But what happens when you have two consecutive days of kedusha? An egg is laid on the first. Would it be permitted on the second? So we had the case of Shabbat and Yom Tov. Then we had the case of which Rav said was asur. Then we have the case of Yom Tov Sheni Shogaliot, which he said was mutar, because it's going to be Mima Nafshach on the second day. And now we have the case of Rosh Hashanah. And as we began to explain, Rosh Hashanah is fundamentally different. The Gemara discusses here. It's also discussed in the Mishnah like towards the end of Masechet Rosh Hashanah. When we had the Rosh Hashanah learning program, we discussed that as well. But So here we say, unlike the case of Yom Tov Sheni Shogaliot, where we treat it as two separate days, and one is certainly a safek, by Rosh Hashanah we find that in fact the rabbis made it a gzeira, made it a takana, that it is like one long day, Yom HaRichta, and therefore the egg that's laid on the first day will be still forbidden on the second day. And again, it's practical halacha, it's Yom HaRichta lechumra, not lekula, which means you still can't prepare from the first day to the second day of Rosh Hashanah, because for that we are stringent, say there might be two, but nonetheless we really do treat it as one. So I think we saw that, yeah, so we are on Daf Daled Amud Bet, towards the end of the page, about 3 lines from the bottom. It says Itma. Just before that we had this, we had the statement again, regarding Yom Tov Sheni Shogaliot, even though when we know when it is, nonetheless we still have to keep that that minhag. So now regarding Yom Tov Rosh Hashanah, it says like this: Itma shnei yamim tovim shel Rosh Hashanah, Rav Shmuel adam mitavai unoda bezeh asura bezeh. So here, unlike the previous cases we saw machloket, here we say both Rav and Shmuel both agree that noda bezeh asura bezeh, it's going to be forbidden on both days. Why? Titnan. Right. Initially, it was that when it comes to Rosh Hashanah, that one could accept Rosh Chodesh Tishrei. Of course, Rosh Hashanah is the only Chag which falls out on Rosh Chodesh. Therefore, they would accept the testimony of the witnesses the entire day, meaning even if they came very, very late on towards the end of the day, we would still accept it, and retroactively that day would be Yom Tov. It happened once that the witnesses tarried. They came late on, very late in the day. And as a result of that, so we're going to go back in a minute to see Rashi, but over to the next daf, it says, that the Leviim got the Shiur Shel Yom wrong, because they already assumed that it was a Yom Chol, and in fact, it was not. It was Rosh Chodesh, and it was Rosh Hashanah. So since that happened very late on, the day is getting late, you have to bring the korban, you have to sing the shiur. Therefore, says the Gemara, they established that the witnesses could only come until mincha time. If they would come after mincha time, meaning they would still continue to treat that day as a Yom Tov, because they already have out of Safek, but we don't accept their testimony to make that day Yom Tov. To make that day Rosh Chodesh, excuse me. Only the next day is going to be Rosh Chodesh. So here's a case where there is no safek at all. You know when the new moon was seen. It was seen on the first day. Nonetheless, we established that actually the second day is going to be Yom Tov. So that's where the takana of the Rosh Hashanah of 2 days comes from. It's not because they didn't know, but it's they made that decision, that decree, even though they did know. So let's just see Rashi, how exactly this plays out before we get to the next historical stage. So back at the bottom of Daf Daled Amud Bet, says Rashi. He says, Asura Bazeh, 3 lines from the bottom. Asura Bazeh Shem Vadai Chok Kavua Liot Ki Yom Aroch Midrabanan. This is not out of doubt. This is certain, and this is established as a one long day, Midrabanan. This was not done due to doubt. כל היום, יום 30 של אלו. ומבערב היו אסורים במלאכה, שמא יתקדש החודש. So Rashi explains how this works. We're on now the 30th day of Elul. So the Gemara said initially you would accept the witnesses all day. He says already the night before, again, because the night before you don't know are the witnesses coming today or are they coming the next day? So today might be Yom Chol, it might be Rosh Hashanah. So everybody would assume in the nighttime that it is Rosh Hashanah, meaning they wouldn't do any melacha. Right? Out of the safek that maybe lemachar the next day is going to be Rosh Chodesh. Therefore, the night before was treated as Yom Tov. The entire day you're waiting for the witnesses to come. Maybe they'll come. Anytime they would come until nightfall, their testimony would be accepted, and you would establish that day as Rosh Chodesh and hence as Rosh Hashanah. Over the page, top of Daf Amud Alef, v'nitkalklu alevim bashir, says Rashi, tamid shel ben ha'arbaim, shamu bo shira shel chol, shiur sfurim shelo yavo od. Okay, there are different opinions in the Rishonim precisely how to unpack this. What was the mistake that they made with the shiur? But Rashi understands as follows. He says, when it came to the Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim, the afternoon Korban Tamid, and there's a song that goes along with it, they said the song of Chol, not of Rosh Chodesh. Sheyusvam Shelo Yavo Od Hayom, Od Vayom Chol. And then Ukshebao Nimtza Shu Kodesh, when they came, actually it was Kodesh, it was the Yom Tov. Ubeshel Shachar en Ta'ut, the Betamid Shel Shachar, Afilu Ukdash HaChodesh Kodem HaKravato Shir Shel Chol Hayu Omrim. He says regarding the morning, right? There's a mistake in the Shir Shel Yom at the Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim. What about the Tamid Shel Shachar, the Tamid of the morning? Says Rashi, there's no issue there because there they would sing the song of Chol anyway, and that was fine. Because usually the witnesses would not come that early; they wouldn't be there in time for the morning. Okay.
Can I just ask a question, Rabbi Kenigsberg?
Sure.
The concern seems to be about the Shiur Shel Yom. What about the Korban Musaf, a special Korban Musaf for the Yom Tov? If they declare it late in the afternoon, can they still bring it, or what happens?
Yeah, so that is an excellent question. Some of the Rishonim, I don't remember if it's Tosfot who addresses, but some of the Rishonim do address that point because it seems relatively minor. You're saying it's there's a Nitkalkulu Bashir. What about the Korban itself? So I think there are, I don't remember offhand, I think there are Rishonim who actually say that was the that was the issue. I mean that the Shiur here goes along with the Korban. Like we say, Rashi here just understands it as the Shiur going along with the Korban Tamid. I'll try and check it out and get back to you tomorrow. But I think there are those who understand that it's actually a greater issue of the Korban itself. Okay, so then Rashi says Ada Mincha. We see at this point they said you could only receive the Eidim until Mincha. Ada Mincha says Ada Kravat Tamid Shel Ben Arbaim. Right, this is until the time of bringing the Korban Tamid of the afternoon. Aval achar mikan oto hayom harei me'ubar. But from that point on, we say no. Elul is now me'ubar. In other words, Rosh Chodesh is only going to be tomorrow. Umunin miyom ha'machorat. This may be answer Shlomo's question from last week. Right, says Rashi, and then from that point on, they say, if the Eidim have not come by Mincha, we are saying that the next day is going to be the day that we start counting for Yom Kippur and Sukkot. In other words, only the next day will be counted as the first of Tishrei. But what happens now if the witnesses come? So we've said that if they come, we're not going to count today as the first day of Tishrei. We're not going to count today as Rosh Chodesh. Nonetheless, we aren't disparaging about it. Meaning, we don't say, okay, once we say the witnesses haven't come by Mincha time, so we've now established that only from tomorrow we will count as Yom Tov. So you could say, okay, well, from this point on, remember, since the night before, they haven't been doing Malacha, because maybe it's Rosh Hashanah today. You're saying tomorrow is actually going to be Rosh Hashanah. So we say, no, we still say you can't do Malacha the rest of the day. Since they were the same way, they were not able to do Malacha until Mincha, so too from Mincha. And the reason for this, of course, is so that in the next year, people won't say, "Oh, well, we started off keeping not doing malacha, but then they came along and changed it." So in order to not to cause that confusion, they would still not do malacha, even though we established that the next day is Rosh Hashanah. And therefore, now explains Rashi. Alma, תחילת עשיית שני ימים לראש השנה, אפילו בבית דין, אבל ולא מספק. So you see here that the beginning of the establishment of 2 days of Rosh Hashanah was even in the Beit Din, even in the Sanhedrin, and it was not because of a doubt. They knew certainly that tomorrow is Yom Tov, the next day is the first of Tishrei. Nonetheless, they established it in this way. That it was established as a decree of the sages, not as out of a safek. When Eidim came after Mincha. Right. So that is regarding in the Beit Din itself. In other words, in the Beit Din itself in Yerushalayim, if the Eidim would come on the first day before Mincha, then there would only be 1 day Rosh Hashanah. If the Eidim did not come at all, then there would be 2 days Rosh Hashanah out of Safek. If the Eidim came after Mincha on the first day, so then we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, but not out of a Safek. 2 days because of the Takana. The places that are further away would always have 2 days out of Safek because they just don't know. But we see that it starts off in the Beit Din itself where there is no Safek and there are still 2 days. Yeah, so he says, Varuchukim yeshalem lasotan b'chol shana. Every year they would have to do 2 days. Shema yavo edim achar mincha, because maybe the witnesses did come after mincha. And therefore we see it's one long kedusha. We can't say, like we said by Yom Tov Sheni Shogaliot, that it's a miman nafshach. One of the days is actually chol. No, because you see both are kodesh. En kan chol ela shneim kodesh. Okay, and therefore that is why Rav said and Shmuel that Beitzah Shnoda Bazeh is Asura Bazeh regarding Rosh Hashanah. Now. So this is all based on the Mincha, the Mishnah, at the end of Rosh Hashanah that said there's a historical progression here. Initially, the Eidim could come all day on the first day of what's meant to be Rosh Hashanah. Then we said because of Kilkulu Alevim Bashir, or maybe with the Korban, whatever it may be, but because of this Kilkul, they said that the Eidim can only come, we only accept them to count that day as Rosh Chodesh, if it's before Mincha time. Then the Mishnah continues and it says that from the times of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, they would go back and they would accept the witnesses the whole day. So how is that? Question is, because if there was after the Korban, there was no longer a concern regarding the Shirah or the Korban because there was no Beit HaMikdash. And therefore, if we go back to the original enactment, meaning there was a time when there was no Beit Mikdash, but they were still doing Kiddush HaChodesh, how does this affect the din of Beitzah? So says the Gemara, we're now on the fourth line on Daf Amud Alef. It says, Amar Rabba, mitakanat Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elach, Beitzah muteret. Okay, we said that the Beitzah is going to be Asura. That was the name of Rabbi Shmuel. Comes along Rabbi and says, from the time of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, the Beitzah is now going to be permitted again. Why? Titnan. Because it says in the Mishnah, Mishecharev Beit HaMikdash, Hitkin Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, Sheyu Makablin Edut HaChodesh, Kol Hayom. Right? Once the Mikdash was destroyed, so Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai made many different enactments. One of them was that you can now accept the Edut HaChodesh the entire day again, because we're not worried about this kilkul of the Leviim. Says Rashi, Mitakanat Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, Shehechzira davar liyoshno. He returned it to its former state. Lekabel edutan kol hayom ulekadesh hayom, to accept the testimony the whole day and to make that day Rosh Chodesh. Nimtza she'en beit din osin shnei yamim, and therefore from that point on, Beit Din themselves wouldn't be doing 2 days. They would always know when it is. And those who are further away, who are now still keeping 2 days, it's only because of the doubt. Shein Yodinim Nikadesh B'Yom Shlishim Im B'Shloshim V'Echad. They don't know when Rosh Chodesh was, day 30 or day 31. V'En Kashar Yomim Tovim Shel Galiot. It's the same as every other Yom Tov Shel Galiot. Ubeitzah Shnoda B'Zeh Muteret B'Zeh Miman Nafshach L'Chad B'nai Uchol. And therefore, the Beitzah, the din of the Beitzah should be exactly the same as it is by Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galiot. So claims Rabbi. Says the Gemara, continues, Amale Abaye Ve'arav Shmuel Da'amrit Ava Beitzah Surah. So he says, Abaye says to Rabbi, what are you talking about? It says we already saw in the Gemara that Rav and Shmuel now live after the time of the takana of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, that they said that the din is asur. How can you say it's mutar? That is what Abaye says to Rabbi. So Rabbi answers back. He said, right, Amarle Abaye v'harav u'shmod amit ava beitzah surah. Amarle amin alach ana Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai v'atamad li Rav Shmuel. Says Rabbi, I don't understand. I just told you what Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai established. You're arguing with me with Rav and Shmuel. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai is one of the Tanaim. Rav and Shmuel are Amoraim. They can't argue against him. Now, although it doesn't say explicitly that right, Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai doesn't say anything explicitly about the Beitzah, and this is what the Gemara is now going to discuss. Nonetheless, he does say that the whole day you could accept the witnesses. So based on that, that's why Rabbi says this overrides what Rav and Shmuel said. So now the Gemara explains why. It says Rav Shmuel kashamat nitin. Says that's exactly the point. You're claiming Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, you're claiming Rav and Shmuel, but how did Rav and Shmuel, who said that the 2 days of Yom Tov, of Rosh Hashanah, are considered like one long day? Why? Because the witnesses may come later on and they aren't accepted, and therefore it's 2 days not out of Safek. But Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai said that's not true anymore. Said in the Mishnah that whenever the witnesses come, we accept them. So how do Rav and Shmuel say what they say? Right, Rav Shmuel kasha manitin answers the Gemara lo kasha halan v'halahu. Okay, this is he says this is for us and this is for them. Normally, when the Gemara says halan v'halahu, referring to two different groups, saying this is the different din for those in Eretz Yisrael and those in Bavel, and that is or in the Gola, and that is how Rashi explains here as well. Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai was in Eretz Yisrael, Rav Shmuel is in Bavel. Says Rashi, L'Rav Shmuel kasha matnitin. According to Rav and Shmuel, how do we resolve our Mishnah? Diktani techazar davar liyoshno, that we say it goes back to the way it was before, and therefore it should be mutar. Halan v'alu livnei Eretz Yisrael shosin yom echad muteret. Okay, for those in Eretz Yisrael where there is only 1 day of Rosh Hashanah. Right, as we know, by the way, nowadays, even in Eretz Yisrael, we keep 2, but this is a fascinating discussion as well. It goes through in the Rishonim. There's a big machloket amongst the Rishonim, whether in our days you need to keep 1 day or 2 days of Rosh Hashanah in Eretz Yisrael. But in any event, he says in Eretz Yisrael, or certainly close to the Beit Din, right, where they would keep 1 day, Shosin Yom Echad, Muteret, the Beitzah is going to be permitted. Aval Didan Bnei Gola, Asura, for those of us that are still far away in the exile, Asura Sharei Adayin Anosin Shnei Yamim. So we still do 2 days. V'odenu kavat chila mipnei ota takana rishona, lo mipnei safek. We still do 2 days because of that original takana, not necessarily because of the safek. Hilkach ho'il v'lo pasku me'etzleinu mishetchalnu ein lakel. Since it never stopped from us, we can't now be lenient. In other words, what he's saying is like this. At the stage, when did we say that the Beitzah on the 2nd day of Rosh Hashanah became Asur? It became Asur at the stage when we said that you couldn't accept the witnesses from Mincha onwards. When we say you can't accept the witnesses from Mincha onwards, from that stage, we say that the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah are not treated as a safek, like every other Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galiot. They're treated as Yom Echad Aroch. That applies everywhere. Now, when the Churban, meaning within Eretz Yisrael, outside of Eretz Yisrael, everywhere. Now, after the Churban takes place and that original decree is changed, and that is changed, and the witnesses can be accepted all day. But nonetheless, the fact that doesn't change the fact that in Chutz La'aretz, in Bavel, you're still keeping 2 days because of a safek, because you don't know what happened, and you don't know what happened might mean that they are keeping 2 days, which are not as a safek, but as a takana. So that original takana that was never changed. There was never any practical ramification for that, and therefore in Chutz La'aretz they still have to keep the 2 days, and the egg will still be forbidden on the second. Right, that's what he says. V'lo pasku me'etzleinu mishatchalnu ein lakel. V'lomar ein minagenu zeh mipnei takana rishona lebnei safek. Don't say that no, it's not because of that takana. It's actually just because of the safek, and therefore Beitzah muteret. Halo amrinan. We don't say that. The kevan de lo paska ota takana me'etzleinu, since it never changed for where we are shana achat, in 1 year lasot yom echad, we never changed to a situation where we now do 1 day. Right, we still do 2 days, and it's still because of that original enactment. So adayin b'soreinu harishona amadnu liotam kiyom aroch. Then it will be like 1 long day. In Eretz Yisrael, in Yerushalayim, in the Beit Din, on the other hand, it's now different. It's now they would not keep the 2 days anymore. They only keep 1 day, and therefore that has changed. So that's the first answer of the Gemara. It says lo kasha halan v'halahu. Now we're about halfway down the Amud. Back in the Gemara, it says that was Rabbi and Abaye. Now Rav Yosef Amar af mitakanat Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai ve'elach Beitzah asura. Okay, so it's like this. When before the Churban, everybody agrees. Before the Churban, because since this Mishakil Kulu Alevi and Bashir, everybody agrees that wherever you are, Beitzah is going to be forbidden. That was laid on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, is still going to be forbidden on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. The question is, what happens after the Takana of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, after the Churban? So Rabbi says, after the Churban and after the Takana, it goes back. It goes back, and the Beitzah would be muteret. Beitzah would be allowed on the second day. Abaye challenges him on that. Answers the Gemara, no, that which we say it's allowed, that's only in Eretz Yisrael. But in Bavel, it's still going to be forbidden. Okay. Now, Rav Yosef says, no. Rav says, according to everybody everywhere, even after the Takana of Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, this Beitzah is still going to be Asura. It's still forbidden on the second day of Rosh Hashanah. Why? My Tama. Have a davar shebaminyan. This is a davar shebaminyan, which we'll explain in a moment. The Gemara is now going to take a digression, and for the better part of the rest of certainly the rest of the Amud and half of the next Amud as well, we're going to get into discussion about davar shebaminyan. We'll come back to the Beitzah, but later on. But we're going to digress to this first. He says, "Kol davar shebaminyan tzarich minyan acher lahatiro." Whenever you have something which is davar shebaminyan, you need another minyan in order to change it, in order to reverse it. So what is a davar shebaminyan? So this comes up in a couple of different places in halacha. We spoke previously what it's not referring to here. Sometimes you have davar shebaminyan when we talk about the halachot of tarovet. So remember, we spoke about davar sheish lo matirin. So davar shebaminyan might also mean over there where you have an item which is significant and it is counted by itself. We saw etchedar kol limnot, koshtar kol limnot. That's a previous machloket. We saw Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. That is sometimes talk about davar shebaminyan. It's an item, an article which is counted and is significant in and of itself. But not to get confused, that's not what we are referring to over here. Over here, what we're referring to by davar shebaminyan is minyan in the sense of numbers, in the sense that the Beit Din got together, the Sanhedrin got together and made an establishment. And when the sages got together and established that principle or takana or enactment, whatever it may be, that even we need another minyan, we need another assembly of the sages, of the Sanhedrin, to go back and to reverse it. Even if the reason no longer applies. That is what we say, batel tam lo batel takana. That there are certain gzerot and establishments of Chazal that they made. The sages at that time had that authority, and it's only if that Beit Din that is equal in number, in minyan and in chokhmah, that is able to come back and to reverse that decision. So that is essentially what we're saying here. We're saying that this establishment regarding when you accept the Eidim, that was a Davar Shebeminyan. So now you need another minyan to reverse that. We will see. So we'll see later on in the daf, going back specifically how that relates to this case, how that relates to this case of the Beit HaMikdash and the Beitzah and Yom Tov, etc. But before that, the Gemara is now going to prove. The Gemara is going to prove the statement that it's just made, that a davar shebeminyan tzarich minyan acher la'atiro. How do we know? And we're going to bring 3 proofs for it. 2 proofs from the Psukim and another proof from the Mishnah as well. And the Gemara will explain why all 3 proofs are necessary. Says Rashi, have a davar shebeminyan. He says, Beitzah zo neseret bekibutz chachamim shenimnu v'gamru la'asotan shnei yamim kedusha achat. This egg, which would be forbidden, that was done bekibutz chachamim, with the assembly of the sages. Shenimnu v'gamru la'asotan shnei yamim kedusha achat. They came together and they made an establishment to make the 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, as one long kedusha. Im lo ba'u edim lifnei mincha. That is when the edim don't come before mincha, only come after mincha. And therefore, at that point in history, anytime we have 2 days of Rosh Hashanah, it's not because of a safek, it's because of this takana. That's how they established it, in case the witnesses don't come. So we see that is a davar sheba minyan. Tzarich minyan acher, says Rashi, sheyimnu lecha vitiruhu. Right, you need another minyan, another assembly of sages to come together and to allow it, that which they had previously forbade. Ulakaman parchin and Beitzah mitzvah b'minyan. The Gemara is going to ask later on, who says, right, you just said that there was a minyan to go to make this establishment, that you're not going to accept a testimony for Rosh Chodesh till the next day. But who says that the same thing was done regarding the Beitzah, to make it forbidden? Beitzah mitzvah b'minyan. They only made the establishment regarding accepting the testimony. And that's what Rabbi Yochanan came back and changed. So Mimele, maybe with the egg will change as well. Okay, we're gonna have to see. So just read the Psukim. What it says in the Gemara. Called Davar b'shem minyan tzarich minyan acher latiro. Amar Rav Yosef mina minalach. So Rav Yosef is the one who said this. He says, where do I know this from? What is the source? Dichtiv. So it says in the Psukim, Lech emolem shuvu lachem la'olechem. This is after at Mamad Har Sinai, where Moshe Rabbeinu is told to go back and tell the people, you can go and you can return to your tents. Everybody had to, all the husbands and wives had to separate 3 days before Matan Torah. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbat goes through, explains the cheshbon, why precisely it's 3 days. But they had to separate for 3 days in order that there should not be any, nobody should be tameh, and they should be fit to receive a prophecy at Har Sinai. Afterwards, it says, Lechem olem shuvu lachem la'olechem. He says to them, go back to your tents. Why does he have to tell them that? Why don't they just go back automatically? So the Gemara is going to say that's because it was a davar shebeminyan. Ve'omer. And furthermore, there is another pasuk. It's in the same context of Mamad Har Sinai, but it is a different pasuk, and it's going to be a different limud. Bimshoch hayover hey mayalu bahar. Okay. At the time when you continue bimshoch hayover, means where you are blowing the shofar, that's when they can go up. Or when you stop blowing the shofar, we'll see exactly how the Gemara learns it. That is when you can go up to the mountain. They're referring to Har Sinai. Of course, when Matan Torah took place, Har Sinai, they were not allowed to go anywhere near the mountain, not allowed to go up. Once Matan Torah concluded, so the mountain lost its kedusha, and anybody could approach it. It was just another mountain at that point. So we're going to see from those 2 psukim why each one and why it's necessary to bring both to learn out that davar shebeminyan tzarich minyan acher latiro. And if that's not enough, we're going to bring a Mishnah, etc. It's going to bring a Mishnah regarding bringing the fruits of Rivai into Yerushalayim. We're going to see how that is related to this topic as well. Okay, but we'll stop then and we will pick it up from those proofs tomorrow.
Have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Have a great day.